I want to start with number 22 LSU, a 6.5-point favorite on the road at number 21 Missouri. This game has an over-under of 64.5 points. They're expecting a shootout in Columbia. Game kicks off at noon Eastern on ESPN. I think we need to have a conversation about LSU's defense. There's a ton of talent on this unit, but they're just getting shredded. I know this was a worry as early as week one, but I hate how they're using Harold Perkins. They moved him to inside backer instead of just being an ears pinned back pass rusher, and that's kind of neutralized him. Now he has to think. Now he has more responsibilities instead of just doing what he does best. And if I had to do a little predicting here, I think he's going to fall in the NFL draft. He might have been a top 5, maybe even a top 10 draft prospect, but he may fall a little bit. And it could turn into a Micah Parsons situation where we kind of look back in a few years and be like, how on earth did this team get their hands on them at 11 or further? Just keep that in mind with Harold Perkins as we move forward. The defensive secondary, though, that's the primary issue with LSU. The teams are also able to line up and run it straight at them with success anyway. We saw Ole Miss do that in that big-time shootout last week. They're 117th in PFF's coverage grade. Kelly, that's around teams like Oklahoma State, Michigan State, and Baylor. Not company that you want to be sharing if you're LSU at this point in the season. And having issues in the secondary, not ideal against the man lined up across the field from them, Luther Burden. His 4.78 yards per route run is third best in the country. He's primarily a slot receiver, and slot coverage for LSU has just been an issue. Nobody active currently is allowing under a 100 quarterback rating when targeted out of the slot. I know that's in the weeds, but hey, if you're not here for in the weeds coverage of these college football games, this probably isn't the podcast for you. Only 3 quarterbacks this season, Kelly, have 10 or more touchdown passes with no interceptions. We have Sam Hartman, we have Cam Ward, and as everyone expected, Brady Cook. He's top 10 in completion rate at 74%, 11 touchdowns, no picks. He has 11 what they call big-time throws and just 2 turnover-worthy plays. The Missouri offensive line has been playing really well, too. They're 3rd in run block grades, 14th in pass block grades per PFF, so they're keeping them clean. It's easy to succeed when you can sit behind a pretty good offensive line. Across the way, Jaden Daniels, you know the name. He's been playing at a very high level as well. He's 3rd in yards nationally, 16 touchdowns. That is tied for the 2nd most. And then Brian Thomas. We talked about Malik Neighbors all preseason. He was an all-SEC, all-American, everything. But Brian Thomas has really been the breakout for LSU this season. His 8 touchdowns is tied for the most nationally, and he's got a perfect passer rating when targeted so far. So when you go to Brian Thomas, good things happen. Jaden Daniels has 75-plus rushing yards in 3 of 4 games against FBS competition, and 30% of those rush yards come on breakaway runs of 15 or more yards.
Yeah, Brett, using my most deserving rankings, this game is a 2-loss, unranked SEC team on the road at an undefeated number 13, again, most deserving rankings, SEC team. On the surface, you'd assume that the undefeated home team is the favorite, but as I talked about in the open, this is a very classic rating versus ranking game. I have LSU minus 8.5 in this one. It's a 73% win expectancy. At number 14, LSU is my highest power-rated 2-loss team, 1 spot ahead of Clemson. The offense has been genuinely awesome this year. You touched on it a little bit. They rank number 4 nationally by my numbers. But holy cow, Brett, yes, the story of LSU is this defense. I talked about it last week before picking Ole Miss to win the game outright against LSU. It continues to be an issue, giving up over 700 yards to Ole Miss this past week, The LSU defense is now an astonishingly bad number 73 in my unit rankings, Brett.
Oh my
goodness.
Yes,
I know, man. Yes, this LSU team has faced 2 top 15 offenses away from home this season. That needs to be noted. But number 73, like you said, there is way too much talent on this unit to be ranked that poorly. It's ridiculous. It needs to be fixed. There's no excuse for that. LSU should never be number 73 on the defensive side of the ball. And more bad news, LSU has 0.9 fewer wins than expected by my preseason numbers or expectations for the number 5 power-rated team coming into the year. That's number 109 nationally. The good news, though, for LSU, Missouri isn't Ole Miss. Boosted by a home win against Kansas State and a neutral site win against Memphis, Missouri is now number 13 in my most deserving rankings, as I mentioned earlier. There's only a 45% chance that the average top 25 team would be 5-0 against the Tiger schedule. That's 9th best nationally. So the resume is really good. Missouri has 1.3 more wins than expected through week 5. That's number 15 on my overachievers list. All that's great. But from a predictive side, Missouri is number 36 nationally. They have the number 30 offense and the number 29 defense. Those aren't bad, but it's not as good as the resume would suggest maybe this team is from a predictive standpoint. Even with 5 wins already on the board, Brett, my numbers are projecting just 7.6 regular season wins on average here for the Tigers. My model thinks Missouri is going to score points, and the fact that this game is in Columbia, it gives Missouri a puncher's chance. But LSU is the stronger team, at least on paper. And bottom line, my numbers have LSU minus 8.5. It's a 27% chance that Missouri is one of only 2 remaining undefeated SEC teams after this weekend. What does this game do to the conference, the race to win the 2 divisions? LSU out of the West, Missouri in the East. Currently, LSU has an 11% chance to make it to Atlanta. If they win, it only bumps up to a 13% chance. If they lose, you might as well call them out of it. It's down to a 2%. For Missouri, they do play in the East, which is the quote, easier of the 2 divisions. Right now, they have a 3% chance to make it to Atlanta, despite the fact they're undefeated. If they win this game, it jumps to 7%, which would be second best in the division behind only Georgia. If they lose, again, I know it's only their first conference loss, but I talked about it. My numbers only project them to pick up a couple more wins the rest of the year. The chance of them making it to Atlanta falls to 1% with a loss.
I was at first surprised to hear you say that you're projecting just 7.6 wins on their schedule, 5 already on the board. But looking at it, LSU this week at Kentucky, South Carolina, that's probably one of those. Bye week at Georgia, Tennessee. They host Florida at Arkansas. So yeah, the meat of their schedule is still very much ahead for this team. Eli Drinkowitz, if we're talking about records here, he's just 2-9 against AP top 25 opponents. Granted, this is probably the best team he's ever had in Columbia. So, you give and take. You play in the SEC is what it is. You kind of take your lumps there. But 2-9, not quite the record you want to see against AP top 25. I'm sorry, he's now 3-9 because they had beaten Kansas State earlier this year. Sorry, I was trying to steal one from him. This total has been bet up from 58.5 at open. That was just a bad line. We're talking 64.5 now. It's risen a full touchdown, sans the extra point there. So if you're looking to fade the market, I don't know that I'd be fading the market in the total with LSU having the defense that they have here.